What's up everyone, it's X-Fly here, and today I wanted to bring you another tutorial video. So the plane I want to do it on today is, in my opinion, one of the better payware aircraft that's available for you right now on X-Plane 11. And that's the plane that you see right here, the Toliss A319. So you can kind of tell by the name that it's modeled after the Airbus A319, which is a very widely used aircraft in the airline industry. So the Toliss team has given us a model of the Airbus A319 that is really great. I mean, it's very well modeled, it's very good looking, and there's enough system immersion in there that you really can dive deep in the immersion when you're flying this thing in X-Plane. So I wanted to make a tutorial video that was a little bit different than my last one. I watched the last one and I realized that it got a little long-winded doing an hour-long video, doing a full flight. So what I wanted to do with this airplane is I wanted to try to break this down into different segments of the flight leg. So today I'm going to start out with a cold and dark tutorial all the way up to the pushback and startup, and that way I can make these videos as short as possible. And I know, especially when I'm trying to learn new aircraft, I like to kind of pick and choose parts of the video that are parts of the aircraft that I'm really kind of struggling with. So I wanted to try to do that for you guys and see how you like it. You can let me know down in the comments whether or not you like this format or not. But I'm going to try it out like this, see how it goes. So I hope you enjoy this video. I hope you learned something. If I can just teach you something you didn't know, then I feel great about that. So sit back and relax, and I'll see you on the flight deck. Welcome to the flight deck of the Toliss A319, and what you see in front of you is the state that you will come to when you first load up this aircraft. And I know I said I was going to do a cold and dark tutorial. The Toliss doesn't really come fully cold and dark when you start it up for the first time. It's really more of like a turnaround state, but for the sake of context, I'll leave it at cold and dark, because you still have to turn on some systems and kind of get everything ready to get this thing ready to go. So the first thing we want to do when climbing into the flight deck of the Toliss A319 to get it started is you want to pull up the plug-in that's included with this aircraft. So if you go up to the top of your menus, you pull down the plugins menu. You see there's one called Toliss, and from there you go to Open ISCS screen. So this plugin is a really great tool that Toliss has included with this aircraft that allows you to fully control your payload, your fuel, all the different things that you can kind of mess around with, including sounds, like interior and exterior sounds with this aircraft. And I think it's a really great tool that makes it really easy to kind of get everything set up for your flight. So the first thing you want to do is, once you open up this plugin, is you want to make sure you go to this aircraft configuration tab. So here is where you'll deal with the passengers, the cargo weight, the fuel. And so what we're going to do is, I've already set up my flight plan through SimBrief, which, if you remember from my last tutorial, SimBrief is my go-to flight planner for X-Plane 11. And again, it's a free account. You can sign up. I'll link it down below. So if you're curious about that, you can sign up for that. So I'm looking at my SimBrief flight plan, and I'm going to scroll down to my payload and my passenger loadouts. And it looks like today we are carrying 120 passengers. So I'm going to go right here to the passengers slider, and I'm going to scroll that up to 120. So once I do that, the PAX distribution, I always leave that alone just because I'm trying to get the weight as even as possible throughout my plane. So I don't ever mess with that, and you probably shouldn't have to either, unless you just want to. So now we come down to the cargo, and on SimBrief, it doesn't usually give me a actual cargo weight whenever I do the auto generate. But what I like to do is down here where it says 0 fuel weight, I like to match that up as close as possible to my flight plan. So according to my flight plan, our 0 fuel weight should be around 54.8 thousand kilograms. So you see we're about 56.2. So I want to try to kind of shift my cargo weight around to try to match as close as possible to that. So what I'm going to do is, since we have a little bit more weight in the back of the cargo, I'm going to slide that down until it gets pretty close to the forward cargo. And there we go. So 54.8. And it's pretty even distribution, so I'm fairly happy with that. So I'm good with that. So next thing you want to do is you want to click this button that says apply these load settings. And what that'll do, you kind of see the aircraft CG shift. And this is just kind of a visualization of your center of gravity. So next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look at my fuel weight for today. And it looks like my block fuel for today's flight is 5.2 thousand kilograms, so 5,200. So I'll slide this down until I get around that. And these are in hundreds. You can't really go in between hundreds. So if you have a flight plan that gives you a little bit that's kind of in between two, it's always good to round up, just to be safe. So once I do that, I'm going to hit the quick refuel, defuel. And that's it. That's all you have to do as far as loading the aircraft and getting it ready to go. These numbers that are here, we will reference those here in a little bit when we set up the MCDU. And also later on when we pick a runway and we're looking for our takeoff performance, we're going to get that information down here. But you see where it says select departure runway first, so we have to wait till we get a little bit further in our flight planning before we can reference that. So for now, we're done with this. We'll go ahead and close it out, and it'll save those settings, so you don't have to worry about it erasing your settings. So the next thing you want to do when you're going ahead and getting this thing started is you want to kind of brighten up some of these panels so it's a little bit easier to see. So the way we do that is we scroll down to these knobs right here to the left of the screens, and you see where it says PDF, so we'll go ahead and brighten that all the way up. The ND, we'll go ahead and brighten that all the way up. And I like to do both knobs. Then I will come over to the Copilot side and I'll do the exact same thing. So PDF and the ND. So next we will come down to the MCDU, and right here where it says bright and dim, we'll go ahead and click bright till it's all the way up. We'll go over to the Copilot side and we'll brighten that up. Next we'll come to our center console here and we'll brighten up these two screens. So the Ecam knob, we'll scroll that all the way up. And the lower DU, we'll scroll that all the way up. So from there we are basically good to go as far as brightening up the screens. So now we can look down at our radio stack here and we can switch these on. And then we can look at our overhead panel, and there's one more up here that we need to switch on. So once that's done, the next thing we need to do is we need to get our adhere system to start aligning, because it does take a few minutes for it to start aligning. And what the adhere system is it's our GPS system. It's our navigation for the aircraft. So to get this thing going, you see these three knobs here. I'll kind of zoom in so you can see a little bit better. You want to switch them all over to nav. And you see the lights above them change to align. So once we do that, we want to come down to our MCDU panel. And we're going to go to this INIT, or initialization button. We'll click that. And there's a couple things we have to enter here to go ahead and get this thing to start aligning. So the from and to, that is your departure airport and your arrival. So today we're doing a short flight from Dallas Fort Worth down to Houston. And so our departure is KDFW for Dallas Fort Worth. And then you have to do slash, and then our arrival is Houston, so KHOU. So once that's done, we'll hit the key next to the from and to, and that'll enter that for us. And now you see this Align IRS pop up. So that's what we're looking for. So we're going to go ahead and click that. And once we do that, you'll see up here on your Ecam where it says IRS and Align greater than 7 minutes. So that's kind of why I was saying why we wanted to go ahead and get this thing started, because now we've got to wait a little over 7 minutes for this thing to align. So we don't want to be sitting around waiting on that if we were to start a little later. So while we're here, we'll go ahead and fill in the rest of this information on the first page. The flight number is just whatever your flight is for today. It really can be anything. It really doesn't matter. I'm just going to make up a number. American Airlines 1234. Cost index, that's going to come from your flight plan. So I'm looking back at mine, and cost index is 5 for today. And for those of you who don't know, cost index is just a ratio number that airlines like to use to help them determine how to save money on their flight based off of fuel prices. And what this number does, it actually increases or decreases vertical climb in the departure and the approach, so they can be a little bit more fuel efficient if needed. So below that you see cruise flight level and temperature. So it'll actually automatically calculate the temperature for us. But what we want to do is go ahead and enter our final cruise altitude. So for us, looking back at my flight plan, is 31,000 feet. So I'm going to type in 310 and enter that here. And there you go. It enters a automatic temperature calculation for us. So once that's done, we are actually done with this for now. And what we're going to do is we're going to go back up to our overhead panel and start getting some of the systems going. So the Airbus, for those of you who don't know, is a very automated aircraft, and it's really hands-off when it comes to flying this thing. But so a lot of these buttons that you see on the overhead panel, I know it can be kind of intimidating, like, oh, I don't know what these things do. Not all of them are lit up. I don't really know what's going on. But rest assured that, this thing is not near as complex to get going as it looks. So a lot of these buttons you don't even touch. And I'll go ahead and go through this with you. So the first thing we want to do is, right now we're on external power, and you see that here. And we want to go ahead and start the APU so that we can get off of ground power and be able to provide our own power. So, and APU stands for Auxiliary Power Unit. It's just a small turbine in the back of the plane that spins a generator and creates electricity. So if you ever wonder what APU means, that's what it means. So to get our APU going, the first thing we want to do, up here where you see APU fire, we want to go ahead and do a fire test to make sure that if there is a fire, that we will be alerted and there's no malfunction in the fire alarm system. So to do that, we're going to go down to this little test button. We're going to click it and hold. And you'll hear the alarm go off. And sorry if that was a little loud. So now I'm rest assured that if there's a fire on the APU, that I will know about it. So to get the APU going, down here there's 3 switches you need to know about. There's APU bleed, master switch for APU, and starter switch. So the first thing you want to do is you want to click on the master switch, and then you want to click start. Once you do that, then you want to go to APU and you want to click that. So the APU bleed doesn't light up automatically, but once you click it, once the APU gets going, that will come on for you automatically. So, and to ensure that it is going, you can see it on here on your lower DU that the EGT is rising, the M1 is rising. So now you know that the APU is starting up, and you actually will hear some things kind of come to life once it does get going. So kind of the next thing we want to do is kind of go down through our panels and make sure that we are turning everything on that needs to come on. So kind of a typical flow like you would do in any aircraft. You kind of go top to bottom and then left to right. So again, in the Airbus, you're really not touching a lot of these buttons, so we can kind of skip over some things. So starting on the left-hand side, you really don't touch anything here. So in the middle, all you really need to touch are your exterior lights. And I didn't mean to do that. So you hear the air kicking on with the APU, so I'm actually going to turn that down a little bit, because I know it can be kind of loud. Hold on just a second. So, okay, so now back to the lights. So what we want to do is the strobe we are going to leave on auto. And what that does is the strobe lights, which are the white blinking lights on the tips of the wings, when you take off, you're really supposed to have those on, but in the Airbus, the auto button will actually turn on the strobes as soon as your aircraft lifts off the ground. So that's really a nice feature. Beacon we'll leave off for now. Wings we don't need right now. Nav and logo will switch to 1. And what that does is that only turns on the red and green lights on the edge of the wings. We don't need the logo right now because it's daytime. The turn off and the landing lights and the nose light we'll leave off for now because we're sitting at the gate. Seatbelt sign will turn on. No smoking sign we'll set to auto. Emergency exit lights we'll set to arm. And that's basically it. You know, I told you it was a lot simpler than it looks, and that's it. I mean, you're done with the overhead panel at this point. So now, all we have left to do is go down to our MCDU and start programming in our flight plan. So I'm going to cut away for just a second to get my flight plan ready, and I'll be back in just a minute. Welcome back. So I've got my flight plan ready, and we are ready to start entering our flight plan into the MCDU. So if you're like me, you know, I spent most of my time back when I was flying Flight Simulator 10, flying the PMDG 737. You know, I had over 1,000 hours in that thing, and so the FMS on the Boeing aircraft was what I was really familiar with. So when I started flying the Airbus, it really took me a while to kind of get used to how to program the MCDU. And so I really want to stress that it's really not that difficult to learn. It is kind of confusing because it is different from the FMS and the Boeing aircraft. But, you know, once you do it a couple of times, it really is easy, and you really shouldn't worry about not knowing how to do it. So I'm going to step through everything with you today, and hopefully you can watch this and kind of get used to it as you start making flights. So we're still on this initialization screen that we left off with when we were aligning the adhere system. So you can see down here there's a message that says GPS primary, and what all that means is that the adheres have aligned while we've been sitting here setting up the plane. So, and you'll see the map show up and the navigation screen show up here to assure you that it has actually aligned for you. So, zooming in real close here so you can see everything I'm doing. So, when you see this icon up here in the top right, what that means is there is another page to this section of the screen. So, under initialization, there are multiple pages. So, one thing you do have to do, and it's something that I missed several times when I was first learning how to fly this plane, you have to make sure that once you've entered all the information here, that you go to the next page by hitting this arrow that's pointing to the right, and you have to enter the zero fuel weight and the center of gravity, as well as the block fuel for your trip. So, if you remember when we were setting up the aircraft with the weights and with the payloads and the fuel, that I told you that we were going to reference some of those numbers, and that's what I'm talking about here. That's what we need to reference back in the Toliss plugin. So we'll go back up to our menus, Toliss and the ISCS screen. We'll go back to our aircraft configuration, and right here you see your 0 fuel weight CG and your 0 fuel weight. So I'll kind of put this to the side, and I'll scroll over a little bit so that we can do this all on one screen, so you'll see exactly what I'm doing. So up here where it says 0 fuel weight CG and 0 fuel weight, we're going to enter it just like this. So right here on our screen we have 27.1 for our CG. So we'll hit 27.1. And then you see the slash here, we'll hit slash. And then our 0 fuel weight, which is 54.8. And it rounds off these last few numbers and puts a decimal there. So this is actually in thousands of kilograms. So 54,800 is 54.8. So what you enter exactly like this. So the percentage slash the 0 fuel weight, you'll enter it right here with this button. And now you're good to go with that. So same thing with the block fuel. So we've actually burned off some fuel sitting here with the APU running, but our block fuel today was 5.2. So we'll hit that and we'll enter that here. And so there you go, easy as that. So now we are done for now with this until we get to our takeoff performance. So we'll close that back out. We'll come back over here. So once you do that, you are good to go. So that's only 2 screens that you need to know for that. So now we can go ahead and start programming in our flight plan. So to do that, we'll go down here. This button says F-plan. We'll click that. So you see here our departure and our arrival airports. So pulling up my flight plan and looking at our route today. So first thing I want to do is program in the standard departure out of Dallas-Fort Worth. So to do that, we'll click next to Dallas-Fort Worth. Then we'll click departure. So it looks like, based on the wind today, we're going off of runway 17 right. So another kind of something that's not very intuitive with the Airbus MCDU is, in order to scroll up and down through the list, you would think that to go down, you would press down. To go up, you would press up. But it's actually opposite. And a good way that I kind of remember how to do this is I think about this screen like I do my phone or my smartphone. So on your screen, to go down through a page, you kind of drag the page up. And if you're wanting to go back up, you drag it down. So it's the same thing with the Airbus. So see here, I don't see 17 right. So I'm actually going to hit the up button to drag the screen up until I see 17 right. I'll click that. Looks like our departure today is the Ardea 6. So we see that here, so I'll click that. And then our first waypoint after the departure is this 11 waypoint. So I'll click that. So that is our full departure programmed in. So we'll hit insert. And see it populates the different waypoints in that departure for you. So I need to go down here, so I'll hit the up button until I get to this last waypoint. And so now from there, we need to enter our actual route in between our departure and our arrival. So to do that, to enter our next waypoint, we'll click next to our last waypoint that was entered. And I'm going to kind of run through this for you because even though I'm not taking Airways today, but if you were to be doing Airways, you would click next to this Airways button and say you were going on the Juliet 75 airway. So you would enter Juliet 75, put that in the VIA, and then your exit waypoint that you're coming out of the airway, you would enter that to the 2. And then you would do that for as many airways that are in sequence for you. So I don't have any airways today, so I'm not going to do that on my flight plan. So I'll go ahead and hit return. But I'm actually going to directly to another waypoint. So again, I'll go back to this last waypoint. And right here where it says next waypoint, I'm going to go ahead and enter my next waypoint, my flight plan, which is Neil. So it's November, Echo, Alpha, Lima. And I'll enter that here. So there you go. So now it's enter this nil. And you can see here, which is kind of useful, where it's actually calculated your top of climb is going to be somewhere between a lever and nil. So that's, you know, good reference for when you're flying. Excuse me, I'll need some water. So now, nil is my last waypoint before I actually come in on my arrival. So to program my arrival, I'm going to go down to where my arrival airport is, Houston. I'm going to click the key next to it. I'm going to click arrival. So according to my flight plan today, we're coming in on 13 right. So that's right here. So we'll click ILS 13 right, just for demonstration purposes today. So now we want to pick our star, our standard arrival. And it looks like we're coming in on the Kids 3. So I don't see it here, so I'm going to drag up until I see Kids 3. So there's no vias on the ILS, so that would be, if there's a specific waypoint that takes you into the ILS, you would get a list of waypoints here on this via list. But since there's none for this particular ILS, we're going to go ahead and click no via. And now our transition, which is going to be our last waypoint in the flight plan before we enter our arrival, which today is nil. So I don't see that here. Oh, sorry about that. Let me click out of that. Oh. Okay, we're back. Sorry about that. I didn't realize what I'd done, and I couldn't figure out how to get it off. But if that ever does happen to you, and the way I did bring that up is, you see this magnifying glass over the screen? If you click that, it'll pop it up, and then you click it again to take it away. So just FYI if that ever happens to you. So anyways, we were entering our transition waypoint, which is our last waypoint in before the arrival, and which is nil. So I'm going to drag up till I see nil. And once that's done, we're good with our arrival. So we'll go ahead and hit insert. So next thing we want to do is we want to make sure that there's no discontinuities. And we see there is one here. And actually what we'll do, just to kind of show you a visualization of what you need to do to look for discontinuities, something's a little easier than going through the list, is if you zoom out here, you can see our map that has all our waypoints. If you change this over to plan, and then you zoom in a little bit, you can actually step through each one of these waypoints and look for discontinuities. So we're actually going to drag up to the list, go through each waypoint, looking for discontinuities. And we're not going to see any until we get to the end of our arrival, and that's what you see here. So if I zoom back out a little bit, you'll see this discontinuity. And it's actually so far away because it's just wanting us to... And what you're seeing here is the last waypoint on our arrival. If you were to look at the chart, it would say, vector. It would vector us out. And so what this is just a vector that's on the last heading that's assigned in the arrival, all the way out to, infinity. And so, but you wouldn't actually fly that in real life. The air traffic controller would actually give you vectors to align you on the final ILS once you get to the last point. So what we want to do is, instead of having this discontinuity here, we're going to make our flight plan a little easier, and we're going to get rid of this and just connect these last two waypoints together so that, our plane will just do everything for us. So to do this, to get rid of this, what you have to do is you actually have to clear out this manual line before you can get rid of the discontinuity line. So we'll hit clear, and we'll click next to manual. And so now you see it's deleted that. So now what we can do is we can hit clear again and click next to discontinuity, and it'll get rid of everything. So now if we zoom back out to our flight plan and zoom in, and we step through, now you see that our last waypoint in our arrival is now connected to our first waypoint in the ILS. So now we are good to go there. So we'll switch this back to arc, and we'll keep the range where it is. So now coming back down here. So now we are actually done with the actual flight planning as far as putting in the waypoints. So the next page we want to go to is this performance plane, or sorry, page. So we'll hit performance. And so now you see V1, V rotate, and V2. So just kind of a quick overview of these again. V1 is the final safe speed at which we can stop the plane on the runway. So once we hit V1, we are no longer going to stop the plane on the runway. We're going to actually take off because we don't have enough runway to slow down the plane. V rotate is exactly as it sounds. It's when we actually rotate the plane back and take off. And V2 is the safe speed at which we can fly the aircraft if one engine is to go out. So these are important numbers that we do need to note. So remember again when I said we were going to reference the plugin, so we need to go back to the plugin to get these numbers. So we'll go plugin, Toliss, ISCS. So you can see here that now this has changed from what it was before. And this changes as soon as you select your departure runway. So now we have our departure runway selected. We can select our takeoff configuration. So what these numbers are what flaps you want to use on takeoff. So, and I'll exit out real quick, and I'll come down to our flaps right here. So in a Boeing aircraft, you have different actual values of degrees of flaps. In the Airbus, like I said before, it's a very automated plane. So the Airbus has just flap numbers. So setting 1, 2, and 3, and full. So, you know, just to make more sense of what that is, go back to my MCDU, go back to my plugin. So that's what you see here, 1, 2, and 3. So there's very rare cases that you would use flap setting 3 for takeoff. That's mostly used for landing. The only reason you would use that is if you're on a really short runway and you're really heavy. But that is, you know, 99% of the time you're not going to be using that. 2, again, it's used a little bit more often, but not really. You know, the Airbus, they actually are pretty short runway takeoff aircraft. So, you know, 95 to 98% of the time you're going to be using this 1 plus F. And what 1 plus F is flap setting 1, and the F is actually a flex temperature. So a flex temperature is the same thing as a engine derate that you would see on like the 737 or the Boeing aircraft. So flex is just an assumed temperature that you can manually enter into the MCDU, and it will derate the engine so they're not firing at full thrust. And what that does is that allows the airlines to keep their engines running longer and increase the service life. You know, if you're punching that thing at 100%, you know, the life of your engine is going to be a lot lower than it would be if you were to, you know, ease off a little bit and only go like 85, 90% when you're doing takeoffs. So it's just another way for the airlines to save money by not having to replace things as often. So long story short to say that we're going to select this 1 plus F. So the departure runway slope, in X-Plane 11, runway slopes are modeled, but, you know, it's really not going to make a difference if you mess with this value. You can if you want to. Probably the most you're going to see is 2 degrees. But I usually just keep it at 0 just because it's simple and it works. I mean, you're not going to really affect your takeoff if you mess with this. So you can see here, departure runway is what we selected, 17 right. You can see our CG and a trim setting, which we'll come back to in a second. Our flex temperature, it actually calculates a flex temperature for us based off of our weight and our runway length. And right here you see our V1, VR, and V2. So this is actually what we need to enter into our MCDU. So again, I'll kind of put this to the side so we can do it all at one time. Excuse me, sorry, I have a little cough today. And so we'll start entering numbers. So V1 is 151. VR is 151. And you'll see that a lot of times that V1 and VR are usually pretty close to each other. If you're a little heavier, you might see those separate a little bit. And V2 today is 154. So now what we need to enter is this flaps and trim setting, THS, which is trim setting. I'm not sure what the H stands for, but trim and setting, I know that's in there. So we know that we're doing flaps 1. So, and we know that our trim setting, looking at this, our THS here is up 0.6, which is just a unit of trim. So we'll go flaps 1. And again, it's kind of tricky learning how to enter things exactly right in the Airbus, but hopefully you'll, once you do it a couple times, you'll get used to it. So flap setting 1 / and you actually have to enter up. If this said down, you would enter down, exactly how the lettering is here. So up 0.6. So once you do that, you'll enter this, and there you go, it's entered for you. So now, our flex takeoff temperature, we'll go down here, so that's 65 degrees C. Enter that here. And our thrust reduction and acceleration, we'll leave that alone for now. Sometimes I'll change it to 3,000 feet and 1,500 feet, just because it's a little more realistic. But just for simplicity, we'll leave that alone for today. So now we're actually done with our plugin for now. So we will get rid of that, and we'll come back to our MCDU. So now, actually, we are completely done with programming the MCDU. So, like I said, it seems complicated. There are a little bit of tricks as far as how to enter things and what order they enter them in. But once you do it a couple times, like I said, you'll get used to it, and it'll be, real easy. So from here, we're going to come up to the MCP panel, or the Autopilot panel. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put in our QNH, which is going to be our barometric pressure. So, because I've got everything on ideal conditions, actually, if you're in Europe, they use inches of they use QNH, and in America they use inches of mercury. Sorry. And so, because we are in Dallas, we're in America, we're going to switch that over to our inches of mercury over here. Oh, and, sorry, hectopascals is what, Europeans use. So, we're using inches of mercury. So, and you hear that beep, and it says baro reference discrepancy. It's because we've actually changed one side and not the other. So there is separate systems for both sides of the aircraft, which is another great feature in this aircraft. You could actually fly this thing with another person if you wanted to. So we're going to change it on both sides. And because I've got everything in ideal weather settings today, it's 2.9 or 9 or 2. From there, our speed is already in managed mode. Again, this is very hands-off aircraft, so we're going to leave that in managed mode. Our heading is in managed mode, so we'll keep that in managed mode. Altitude, we're going to, if you had an initial altitude for your departure, you could enter that here. We'll go ahead and set it to, 8,000 or 9,000 feet. I'm not looking at my charts right now. I'm trying to keep everything real simple. I'll put 8,000 feet. And you can see once you do that, you have this dot. And what the dot means that it is going to be in managed mode. So, for the Airbus, like I said, it's a real simple, easy flyer. So that is going to be our stop altitude. We could go all the way up to our cruise if we wanted to, but we're going to keep it at around 8,000 feet. And from there, we're going to come down and we're going to put our auto brake to max. Or, sorry. We can't do that yet. Sorry, that was my fault. We can't do that yet. So, actually, we're actually done with the setup for the aircraft. So, like I said, real easy. One last thing that I forgot earlier that we do need to do is we'll go to our pack flow. We're going to set that to normal. It really doesn't matter if you do that or not. And when you're starting the engines for the aircraft, like in a Boeing, you have to turn the packs off. But the Airbus, being as automated as it is, it actually does that for you. Which again is really nice. It's really hands off, real easy to do. So the last thing we want to do is because we are on APU power, we're going to disconnect our external power, and you will hear everything kind of switch over. And once that does that, we will turn on our beacon light because we're actually getting ready to back the plane up and start it. So we'll switch that on, and I'll go to an outside view for you. And that turns on the red beacon light just to let everyone know that, hey, we're about to back this sucker up and get going. So the only thing left to do is to call our pushback. So Better Pushback, again, is another great free plugin. I'll link it below that you can use. And it gives you full control over the pushback of your aircraft. The Toliss actually comes through the app, and I'll show you that right now. Through the plugin, you can actually do your own pushback, but Better Pushback is really the end-all be-all for X-Plane 11, and my suggestion is to download that and use it because it's really great, it's really reliable, and you won't be disappointed. One other thing, while we're here in ground services, we'll go ahead and disconnect the external power. The doors are set to auto. Once you start your pushback and release the parking brake, it'll close all the doors for you, which is a really nice feature. But, since I'm just going through the exercise, I'm going to go ahead and close all my doors. And you'll see things if I switch to the outside view again. Close this. Now you see my doors are closed. So now we'll go back to Better Pushback, and we'll go ahead and pre-plan our pushback. So we want our nose facing to the right, so we're going to use the mouse scroll wheel. And this is kind of a Better Pushback tutorial. Tutorial within a tutorial. So you kind of want to put your plane where you want it to be, and you use your mouse scroll wheel to rotate it. So we'll put it right about here. As long as you're on the line, it doesn't really matter. And we'll go ahead and click to accept that position, and then we'll hit enter to confirm our pushback.
Ground to cockpit, plan acknowledged. Call me through the menu when you are ready.
And so now you hear them say, okay, we've got your plan. Let us know when you want to push back. So actually go ahead and call them because we're ready to push back. So we'll go Better Pushback. We'll hit start pushback. And you'll hear them come up.
Ground to cockpit. Tow is driving up.
And you'll see our tow coming in there from the right. So I'm going to cut away for a minute because it does take a little bit for the tow truck to, as it drives to the building. Gotta love it. So it does take a second for them to actually connect and raise up the plane and everything. So I'm actually going to cut away for just a second for time's sake. And I'll be back when we're ready to start the pushback. Alright, the tow truck is connected and we are ready to push back. So we've already turned on our beacon light to let everyone know that we're fixing them back up. So all we have to do is release our parking brake and then we can start up our engines. So we'll hit the parking brake and you'll see the jetway will leave us and you hear the bell ringing.
Starting pushback, and you may start engines.
I'm going to move up a little bit so my head's not in the seat. So they told us we can start engines. We're going to wait just a second just to make sure we're not facing any other people or aircraft behind us when we start them up. Okay, so to start the engines for the Airbus, you know, it's as automated as everything else. So the only thing you have to do, and let me come down here, is you see this engine starter switch. We're going to switch that to this ignition and start. And you hear the packs kind of go out and the air turn off. And that's what I mean, where it automatically turns everything off for you. So, and you see our lower DU panel change. So to start the number 2, all we do is just flip this 2 up. And you don't have to introduce fuel or do anything. All you got to do is just sit and wait for it to start. You know, monitor your numbers. I'll give you a quick outside view. Gonna see everything starts to spin up and come to life. Sorry. So, all we're doing here is we're looking for our oil pressure. We're looking for air pressure. We're seeing our N2 increase. Our N1 is increasing. Making sure our temperature does not go above a certain limit, go into red. We look at our EGT.
Complete. Set parking brake.
And they're done with the pushbacks. We'll go ahead and set the parking brake for them.
Disconnecting tow. Stand by.
While they disconnect, we'll go ahead and start up number 1. And I'll turn up the sound a little bit, maybe kind of low. So again, we're just kind of watching everything. We'll go ahead and disconnect now. Got oil pressure, air pressure. N2 is rising, our HET is rising, our M1 is starting to rise. Just monitoring, making sure that we don't have a hot start.
Tow is disconnected and bypass pin has been removed. Hand signal will be on the left. We'll see you next time. Have a safe flight.
And you saw everything flash right there. What that was is the airplane actually switching over the electrical bus from the APU over to the engine generator. So again, in the Boeing aircraft, you have to do that manually. So it's pretty nice that the Airbus does that for you. So we're going to watch them, make sure they're out of the way before we go on to the next step. They're good to go. So what we'll do now is we'll turn this starter switch back to normal. We will go ahead and set our auto brake to max, and that's the setting that you put it on for rejected takeoff. We'll come down to our spoiler, our ground spoiler, and we'll arm it by pulling it up. And you'll see this white line right here that lets you know that it's armed. We will switch over to our flight control on our lower DU by hitting this flight control button. So the Airbus has all these buttons and different systems you can monitor, and they're kind of self-explanatory. So we're going to go to flight control, and we're going to go ahead and set flap 1, which is our takeoff flaps. And while those are transitioning, we are going to set our trim. And if you remember, looking down here, our trim is up 0.6. So we're going to, you can see how this is up 1, so it's going to be somewhere in between here. So it's kind of hard to see that right here, but you can actually look right here on your flight control screen, and where it says up 0. So as we move this, you'll just wait till that goes to your setting. Up 6. So now we know we're good to go on trim. And now all we have to do is do a flight control check to make sure that we're good to go. So we'll go ahead and do that. We'll go full left, neutral, full right, neutral, full up, neutral, full down, neutral, and now we'll do rudder. Full left, neutral, and full right, neutral. So that's our flight control check done. So the next thing you see, if we look up here at our Ecam system, our Ecam screen, you can see where our cabin is checked. You kind of have a checklist here. So our signs are on, our cabin is checked, our spoilers are armed, our flaps are set to takeoff. And right here where it says Takeoff Configure, it says to test. And so where that is right here. It says Takeoff Config. And what that's going to do is going to check for your trim, your flaps, make sure that your systems are turned over to the right system. So we're going to go ahead and hit that button, and where it says normal, if it wasn't normal, it would tell you, oh, you got an error, and that'd probably show up over here. And this is also your warning screen. So it says my parking brake set, our Tcat system is standby. So I'm glad I looked at that, because we do need to turn our Tcat system on, so we know, if there's aircraft in the vicinity. And our APU bleeds. So now that our engines are running, we don't need our APU anymore. So to turn it off, we actually just do the reverse of how we turned it on. So we'll turn the APU bleed off and the master switch off. And if we go down to it's on one of these pages, I know it is. Oh, APU, wow, I'm a genius. So if we go down to APU, you'll see after a little bit this will start to decrease, and so we know that the APU is turning off. So we don't really have to sit around and check for that, so I guarantee it's going to do it. So all we have left to do now is to go ahead and turn on some of our lights. So we'll turn the runway turn-offs on. We'll set the nose to taxi. And so if we go to the outside view, just kind of show that we've got everything on. Our flaps are down. Our lights are on. And we are ready to taxi. So I'm going to end this tutorial today right here. So that was everything from starting up the plane to, as far as electrical systems, to programming our flight plan. We set up our flight controls, and we pushed back and we started the plane. So that is really the hardest part of flying this aircraft. Everything else is just a matter of taking off, setting the autopilot, flying your approach, and landing. I mean, the hardest part is getting these things started. Everything else is automated. This plane is really easy to fly. So my next tutorial will be taxiing to the runway. I'll go through the takeoff procedure, and I'll fly all the way through to the right before descent, so I can show you, how to set up the aircraft to descend. So thanks for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial video. I hope you learned something. Make sure to tune in to my next one and my next few in the series so that you can learn how to finish up the flight leg. But again, I hope you enjoyed it. If you liked this tutorial, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button if you want to know when my latest videos come out. And until next time, I'm X-Fly Guy, and I'll see you on the next one.